I have already done a 1,000 round review on this particular gun, and it's fairly detailed and comprehensive. Now, this video, on the other hand, is meant to be supplemental to that, and we're going to focus more on the ownership, the maintenance, and other fine details as well. The first thing we're going to talk about is the general condition of the gun. Beginning with the exterior of the gun, I only have a little bit of wear and tear on the front side of the slide, and that has to do with two things. Number one, the choice of being Cerakote, and secondly, with the frequency I like to draw. Now, keep in mind, aside from shooting 5,000 rounds, that's also including times I draw in competition or even practicing. And on top of that, I dry fire on average about 30 minutes to an hour, 5 days a week. So there is a lot of use on my end of it. And one thing I want to highlight too is the magwell area, because the one thing I talked about briefly in the prior video were the reloads. And if you notice, I don't run a magwell, and that has to do with the rules for carry optics in USPSA. So that's why there's a little bit of wear, but in comparison to a lot of other guns out there that I've had in the past, this is fairly minimal. But there is an asterisk I'm going to put on it, and that is the fact that this is my second frame for this gun. So it's not bad, but when I look at the original one, you know, it has identical wear as well, and this one has probably more rounds and reps through it than this one. And when I went to open the inside of this, the one thing I looked at is all the wear spots on the barrel and the locking lug. The rest of the gun was in phenomenal shape. If anything, once you wipe it down and take a little bit of the dirt away, you can see that it still all looks fairly new on side. And as far as the wear marks on the barrel, it's something I expect. You know, when I looked at my other PX4 full size with about identical rounds, same wear spots, and no indication of anything being loose or anything affecting accuracy. In fact, all the grooves are nice and sharp with inside of the barrels. Now, switching gears to maintenance, it's arguably one of the easier guns I've had to deal with, because taking it apart is simple just by taking a little pressure off the locking block underneath and pulling that bottom tab down like you would find on a Glock, letting that slide come forward, and that's it. And pulling the rest of it apart is simple and easy. You know, take your time with the barrel because it can get hung up in there if it gets a little dirty. And you just pull it out and back. And that's it, and you're ready to clean it. As far as oiling it, it's pretty straightforward. I did mention in the video that they do like to run wet, and that's very true still. But it's important where you do oil it, because you don't want to over oil certain areas, and I'll talk more about that. But literally what I would do is make sure this little galley here in which it rode against the little locking block it had plenty of oil there, and I made sure that there was just a film of oil all over the barrel, but nothing extravagant, just only over oiled in this little area here. And you know, just a touch in the slide and it was good to go. One of my faithful subscribers asked this question, it's a good one, which is, I'm particularly interested in the maintenance, i.e. how often you found yourself having to clean it, lube it, and any issues with ammo or failing to go into battery. Okay, because this leads into where this thing needs to be cleaned, and as well as there was some reliability issues with my gun. Now, at around the 4,000 round mark, I started having extraction issues and as well as light strikes, which I found very strange considering I haven't really messed with anything in the gun, nor did I use ammo with hard primers. So I had actually posted that on my Instagram, and one of you recommended for me to take a closer look in the extractor area. So I did take apart the extractor, and I was surprised of how dirty it was considering the amount of rounds on it. And as I saw how caked up the extractor itself was, I said, okay, well, that could be part of it. And there was one thing I didn't realize when I was starting to clean it, because I'd only pulled out the extractor at that point, which was the fact that the striker itself and spring are exposed as well. And it was so dirty at first I could not see that. And so I pulled that out, cleaned it up, and I can see how that may have actually slowed both the striker down and may have caused issues for extraction to not happen. So that is something you are going to have to pay attention to. Now, this was just this gun, and remembering that my full size had about the same rounds, I took that gun apart and found that it wasn't as dirty on the inside of that. So I started asking myself what I did differently with this. Well, on this particular gun, I was a little bit more liberal with the oiling, and so I did put quite a bit more oil on the edge of the barrel there. And my theory with that is two things. My first theory on that was that a little bit of oil started to seep through the firing pin hole, and within the inherent debris and gas that does go through there, that's how I figured that it was starting to cake up in there. Additionally, there's a firing pin block in there that I do like to oil quite a bit, so the oil could have seeped in there as well, but I was very surprised to see that. Now, going back to the first part of his question is the frequency of maintenance on this. I'm going to recommend that you clean this gun entirely every 2,500 rounds. Now, as far as a field strip, things like that, I would do it as needed, but the oiling of it, I was pretty good about doing it every time I would put the gun away after use. And if you'd been following me on my Instagram, you're going to learn that I had quite a bit of challenges with reliability, but that's not really related to what you get from Langdon. That has more to do with the 140mm mag setup I have for USPSA. I will elaborate more on that in the Good to Great video when that comes out. And speaking of that, if you like this video, please hit that like button as that helps me a lot. And you're gonna wanna subscribe because when that Good to Great video drops, I'm gonna go over and detail everything you need to know in terms of modifying them, taking care of it, and taking these guns to the absolute next level. Now we're going to talk about my favorite part of this gun, which is the shooting experience. And I'm going to start with the pros, particularly from my perspective as someone that's an avid shooter. This is probably the closest I will ever get to a gun that's both lightweight and can shoot predictive doubles, which means I essentially can point this gun and pull the trigger as quick as I can and get a tight group. And so anything within 15 yards, this thing was an absolute monster. Especially the transitions, because that is the benefit of having a lightweight gun, is that everything just happens so much quicker when I would go target to target. And another pro of this was that this gun pretty much didn't care what ammo you fed through it. And I want to elaborate more on that, because not only did it fire pretty much anything I put through it, but it really wasn't a difference in felt recoil. And I know that's important for some of you guys out there. So there are guns out there that really can feel exaggerated when you go from just a factory 115 round to a plus P round. This gun, you know that it's going to actually have more oomph behind it with plus P, but it's not like it was disruptive to the shooting experience in any way. I found that I could train for long hours on this gun in live fire. Most guns, in terms of quality live firing, I'm good for about 200 to 300 rounds, and I start to have a point of diminishing returns. This gun, I had one session where I went up to 700 rounds and I was not tired. I would have to attribute that to, number one, I'm not swinging around a gun as heavy, and secondly, the fact that the gun is so soft in recoiling that I just could keep going and without having a fall off in my performance. So if you plan to want to go train and shoot a lot, this gun is going to be up for that task, assuming that it doesn't have any malfunctions. I'd mentioned earlier on that I was showing this was the original frame. Well, I'm going to expand on that because it cracked right there. And that is 100% my fault. So what happened? I was dry firing in my garage and I was going full speed on my reloads, and it just caught on the edge just right. And I don't know where my grip was because it obviously wasn't there. The gun flew out of my hand, went up, and from where I could tell, it looked like it actually landed on the optic because there's a good gash here and on the front sight. When I looked at the frame itself, there was no indicator that it in any shape, way, or form hit on the frame or made contact with the floor on that. So I was really surprised to see the crack that I got. Now, you would think this part right here would be maybe $100 from Beretta, but here's the catch. Because it is serialized, that's a problem, because you're looking to spend about $600 if Beretta will sell you just the frame. The question is, what did I do about it? Well, rather than spending that much money, because the thing is, with full-size PX4, they're not as popular as their compact counterpart. You can pick up a used one fairly inexpensive. I bought a complete full-size PX4 for $330. And a lot of you familiar with my channel more know that I have a long background in competition. And of course, you're going to ask that question, is the PX4 a viable competition gun? I'm going to say yes, but there are a couple things for you to think about. Yes, I've already touched on its general shooting performance, which were items that were important to me when I was shooting competition, were the predicted doubles, transitions, all still good things. The training, the amount of volume you can do, assuming you have the ammo and the gun doesn't have malfunctions, huge positive. But this is where it's a little interesting on the competition side. If you notice, I said 15 yards inwards, this gun is a monster. 15 yards outwards, you're gonna have to pay a little bit more attention. And I spent quite a bit of time practicing from 15 to 25 yards. Why do I do that? Well, keep in mind, if you're playing IDPA or shooting at IPSC targets, the zone is a lot smaller. Especially in IDPA, you really have to be able to hit that down zero zone on demand. And the thing is, I had to work a little bit harder with this gun, largely due to its weight. Now, this being the GSD model, I did mention it was a little easier to stabilize at distance, but I was also uncomfortable trying to drive the gun at the rate that I did on the 25-yard build drill, especially in a competition setting. When you're looking to get down zero at 25 yards, you're still looking for two really good sights, and stabilizing at that did take me more time, to the effect of where at 25 yards, and when I did it on the drill, I'm somewhere around the 35 to 40 split range. Well, I was looking at the times in competition, I was getting in the 60 to 70 range, which is a lot slower, but even at that, that's about where I was getting down zero with. So when you think about these long shots, like on steel or anything like that, you're gonna have to take a lot more time than you think. Subsequently, you can practice for that, but I put probably close to about half of those rounds practicing in that distance. It was that off for me. And I learned that early on with the full-size model. So I did do some things to kind of help that out a little bit, but they weren't transformative, and I'll leave that for the good to great video. The next point is that the aftermarket for the PX4 is very, very light. Pretty much Langdon Tactical and Springer are your go-tos for parts on these guns, and why that's important is because you need to have options and reliable options as you start to get into the extended magazines and add parts to the gun. It's good to have options, and I'll elaborate more on the good to great video why that was a big hiccup for me on this gun. The final point I want to talk about is that the fact this is a 4-inch barrel. Now that becomes an issue in the competition setting, especially when you got to make power factor. And there were 3 ammo choices that I used to use in prior competition setups that would not make power factor, as it didn't have the velocity on this gun. So if you have a special loadout there, you're gonna want to think about your recipe a little differently. And so I'd say if you are really into training and committed to a gun, you're willing to learn double action, there is a ton of things you can extrapolate from both the performance and elevating your own shooting ability. That's what this gun and who this gun would be for. But I want to ask you guys this question. Knowing what you've seen in my videos and this video, what would keep you from getting a PX4 at this point? I want to hear about that. Sound off in the comments below. And if you do have a PX4, challenge me on some of the thoughts in this video and tell me what you think. And as I'd mentioned earlier, I did do a 1,000 round review on this gun, which is very detailed, and I'll leave that right here for you. And if you want to see my review on the original compact version of this gun, I'll leave that right here for you. But remember this, guys and gals, do not get the gun you love shooting, get the gun that makes you love shooting. And until next time, we will see you all at the range.